Call the meeting to order. Do we need to reprioritize anything?
No.
Okay. So recognition of visitors, a couple here, a couple on Zoom. We'll save comments till the end. If anybody has any comments or questions for the budget.
You want to wait until right before you make your budget
Before the
decisions
yes.
so people can
Yes.
listen.
Okay. And next, Morgan, you're up.
I do want to say before we start this, these slideshows have been a work in progress all day as we've been preparing for this meeting with, changing information and feedback. So they might be out of order. We're going to do our best.
So we can kind of go through the first few. Next one is the vote results, which we talked about in our last meeting. The next one, voting history, which we covered last meeting. The next one, turnout in the two towns, remarkably high.
Morgan, can you go back one? Sorry. Just want to point out that there is a misconception about the increase in spending. And I think it's important for people to understand that Act 127 increased pupil weights so that we have the capacity to provide additional opportunities for our students without it creating an additional tax burden. For the same amount of money, we could add those opportunities. So I think when people look at that percentage increase, it's confusing if you don't understand that has to do with the additional pupil weights that we received from the new funding formula. And that is overly simplified.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember about that ed spending per pupil column in those numbers those are really the only fair numbers to use when comparing spending from one district to another. So we'll talk about it later in the graphs that we've seen before, but you can't really compare tax rates because they're impacted by the CLA. You can't compare overall spending because that doesn't take into account the number of kids you have and the types of kids that you're educating. So that per pupil ed spending is really the number that we use to compare ourselves to the rest of the state.
So, you two had the opportunity at the SU meeting to take a look at this is raw data, so this has not really been redacted yet in terms of there might be some identifiable bits in there. So these were themes from each of the questions we asked on the survey. I didn't report out on themes around communication, or what was the second one, Courtney? It was around how people want to receive information.
And why they did not vote was the second
Oh, yeah.
one.
So that's just information that we'll use to inform internally a communication plan around that. So I know the two of you grabbed that as you came in. Do you need some more time to skim through that?
I'm gonna send it to Devin and right now.
You tell me if there's anything that we talked about in the first meeting that you want this
Sure.
rest of this board to hear. So you might need to refresh, Courtney. Move some slides around. So one thing, just as a reminder, before we enter our budget conversations, this is data from the year that we're in, and this is a comparison of education spending per pupil in all the school systems throughout Vermont. So you can see the very lowest spending school at the bottom of the state, which is a non-operating district, all the way up to the highest spending in the state. The two blue lines near the bottom represent the Northern Mount Valley UUSD and the ER UUSD. We are the 12th, NV is the 12th lowest spending, and ER is the 16th lowest spending in the state for this year that we're in. The first black line represents the Franklin County average, the second black line represents the statewide average, the other remaining red lines represents how we compare to other school districts in our county. On the next slide, that's on the left, is a piece of the graph that we just showed you. That's really the bottom 20, the 20 lowest spending schools in the state just blown up. On the right, that represents information from the budgets that were just voted on. So as you can see, we've kind of blown this up and taken a look at the lowest 20 based on the proposed spending in the budgets that were just voted on. The green reflects communities with passed budgets, the red reflects communities with defeated budgets, the black reflects communities that have not yet voted. So if our spending plan that we proposed on town meeting day had been approved in each of our districts, we would have dropped from the 12th and 16th lowest spending districts in the state to the 9th and 10th lowest spending districts in the state. It's important to note that below us are 4 non-operating districts. So Morgan, Stratton, Holland, and Ira do not have schools. They tuition all of their students out. There are 4 systems below us that do operate schools: Mount Anthony, Derby, Stanford, and Quarry Valley. All 4 of those have approved budgets. So Holland is interesting because they have a defeated budget, but they have no school that they operate. So the only thing in their budget is the tuition that they pay out for the students who attend school in other places. So in theory, it's important to understand this. So as we go back to the table and we take a look at what reductions we're going to contemplate, both the Enosburg-Richford and the M&V districts are likely to fall in terms of where we land in lowest spending, in comparisons for lowest spending in the state.
We talked about this at the last meeting as well, but just reminding you that that red line is the FY24 tax rate. So that's the district-wide rate of the year that we're in now. This sort of charts the progress of the yield, which is the number ultimately set by the legislature, as that's kind of changed from the beginning of January to here mid-February. And then the blue line is the tax rate and how that's been impacted by the yield. And so this is the potential tax rate for that same budget, the one that you went to voters with for town meeting day. And so you can see how much it is in flux by conditions that are out of your control. To the extent that this is useful, and we extend it out through March for your next vote, that yellow line we expect will continue to go up, and what we're hearing, we'll talk about it a little later, is that the number that's going to come out in 2 weeks will be up above $10,000, and that will continue to push your tax rate down even if you do nothing further to cut your budget. So again, this is based on the budget that you warned in March, for town meeting, and the assumptions we made at the time that we went to vote. And at that point, in order to drop your district-wide tax rate by a penny, you would have needed to cut just under $169,000. Each time you do that, the number gets a little bit higher to move it another penny as you move towards the $1 tax rate. Similarly, every time that the legislature adds $89 to the yield, it will drive your tax rate down by a penny. And again, that gets a little bit more costly the closer you get to $1. And as I just mentioned, we're anticipating a number over 10,000. And we'll probably know that by, I'm guessing, Wednesday or Thursday next week. But that's still a guess at this point.
We talk about the tax rate floor here, Morgan.
And in Vermont, the decisions you make on your local budget cannot drive that district tax rate down below $1. So that number is still impacted by the yield, but basically for every town in Vermont, they are paying at least $1 on a district-wide pre-CLA tax rate to support the ed fund. So those cores that have landowners but don't have any kids, they're all paying $1. So what that means is as you get closer to that, either because of budget cuts or from the yield, you're getting to a point where further cuts mean that you are contributing money to the ed fund that you don't need to be. You're basically raising tax money that you're not having the benefit of spending. Still me. So this attempts to explain both the impact of that 1 penny cut as well as kind of shows the impact of the CLA. So this again was based on the budget that you brought to voters on town meeting day and the assumptions that we had in the budget at that point. You'll see across the top of both boxes, the upper one for Enosburg, the lower one for Richford, we are modeling what these impacts are for a house that's valued on the grand list of 100,000, 200,000, and 300,000. In Enosburg, that first box, CLA of 74% means that the fair market value of that property is actually around $134,000. And so that's the value that they should be taxed on. In Richford, because of that recent reappraisal, and so where their grand list has ended up, their CLA is up over 100%, and so a property valued at 100,000 on the grand list actually has a fair market value of about $93,000. And so in Enosburg, after the CLA is taken into account, the property tax bill before any credits for income sensitivity for a house at $100,000 on the grand list would have been $1,485. In Richford, a property grand list value of $100,000 would have been $1,030. You can see on the next line, if we were to reduce that by 1 penny, so cut those budgets, or that budget by $169,000, it would drive the Enosburg tax bill down by $13 and bill in Richford down by $9 for that $100,000 property. And you can see how that goes out for higher level properties, and for all of those, that's before any income sensitivity. This is something that we've been talking about, starting to drill into it, and we'll figure out a way to present that to voters this year and probably in years going forward. This is looking at the current year budget, so FY24, and the ed spending, which is the amount of money that you need to get from the state to support this budget, is $16.7 million. Of that, 1.2 million is raised from residential property taxpayers in Enosburg, about 800,000 raised by residential property taxpayers in Richford. For non-residential taxpayers, so this would be businesses, renters, second homeowners, Enosburg raises about 1.6 million, Richford raises about 1.1 million. The balance of that money, almost $12 million, is coming from somewhere else. So that's things like lottery revenue and rooms and meals tax that the state collects statewide. It's also from towns where they're contributing more in property tax than they're spending in their budgets. So that would be the Killingtons and the Stows, the South Burlingtons of the world, areas that have a very high grand list value and relatively not as much ed spending. So I think this is instructive to voters. On the NMV side, I had someone basically assume that their residential taxpayers in their town, and they're one of 4 towns on that side, was paying about 25% of the tax bill. And that's numbers are probably even more dramatic over there because it's shared over 4 towns. But basically, of this budget, 17% is being raised in Enosburg, and 11% is being raised in Richford. The rest coming statewide.
So this brings us to where we left off at your last meeting. So I took from the conversation and the notes that I took from your meeting in calculating this out. So the SC board met right before this board meeting, and the impact of the reductions that just happened at the SU level equate to a reduction of the ER assessment, the SU assessment. You're going to see that go down $244,750. So Based on conversations with the administrators at the last meeting, there are some natural reductions that we could pull out without eliminating existing positions. So for example, the existing Spanish teacher at Enosburg High School, there's a reduction in FTE that the educator actually asked for in that situation, so that was an easier one to do. We've struggled to fill that Richford Elementary librarian position, and we found someone who's doing it, and they would like to work 2 days a week, so we felt like we could pull that money out of the budget. And then I don't know if the next part is an error, like the LEAPS after school program funding, that is not in addition to, or is it to what we just did at the SU level?
That is incorporated in that 107 figure.
Okay. So that's kind of option one. That was the level that I heard you talk about at the last meeting, and that's what I reflected. There were other things that were not bolded, and I think maybe I'm making an assumption, but I know I heard from Enosburg Elementary School that they know they have a para interventionist who is retiring, and they could choose not to fill that position. And Richford High School has a new teaching position that they could choose not to fill. We had, the only school that hadn't contemplated some sort of reduction was Cold Hollow, and in some conversations with Nate earlier, we talked about that it's a very small school and they have the 6 programs that they're required to fill. So one of the things that they could consider, that you have a co-op work-based learning coordinator position that in the budget is full-time. The person that had that position at the end of last year left. We were not able to find a new person take that position, so one of the teachers at Cold Hollow had a very small class this year, so that person was able to take that on in halftime of her role. That person does not have a small class next year, so we would need to hire for that. But if you wanted to see a reduction also come out of Cold Hollow, what would be contemplated is we'd be looking for a half-time co-op work-based learning coordinator. So you can see the impact in each of those. You know what the reduction will be as a result of the ER reduction to the assessment, and then you can see that in your scenario 1, if you reduce $107,900, that would overall get you to $352,650, which I think is about 2 pennies. And then if you went with option 2, that would get you to $477,650, and option 3 would get you to $512,960. I will just say before you get into your discussion about this, I spent a lot of time looking at the seniority lists today, and also looking at the open positions we have within the system, positions that we already know people have retired from, or positions that hadn't been filled from last year to this year. So what I would like to say to the board is we struggle with teacher retention and recruitment for a lot of reasons, geography being one, how much we're able to offer in terms of teacher compensation. As you can imagine, it's pretty hard to compete with people who are spending twice as much per pupil as we are, so we really struggle with that piece, even though the board has made really good progress in the last 2 negotiation cycles. So what I would like this board to consider is directing me not to send out any reductions in force. All of these reductions that you're making would impact open positions, but not, and people who wanted to reduce. It wouldn't impact, we wouldn't eliminate anyone's positions with this spending plan. And if something happened that this second version of your budget was voted down and we needed to make further cuts, instead of cutting people that we have already, I would rather cut open positions that we have and reassign some of our existing people if we needed to make a shuffle, do it that way. So I'm gonna ask the board to consider directing me not to reduce staffing levels in order to maintain all of our existing employees.
Any discussion on that? Any ideas?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you talk about the changes in the Leaves After School program, like, I just feel like it's pretty like vague, like, what changes exactly are you talking, like transportation, numbers?
I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes
I
we're
just feel
dealing
like
with
we
so
really
much
bank on,
information.
a lot of families bank on that.
Yeah, we're dealing with so much information, sometimes it's easy for us to forget an important part.
Yeah.
This is not contemplating any major changes to the LEAPS program at all, so it should be something that's not felt by families or by students. So I think I definitely got that from the survey, that there was a little bit of panic that we were gonna eliminate summer, we were gonna eliminate the level of LEAPS after school, and it came loud and clear how much our families really appreciate having that LEAPS offering. So this has more to do with how we're funding LEAPS, so I'm gonna have Morgan describe that for this board.
Sure, and so at the supervisory union level, we get a pretty significant amount of revenue based on Medicaid billing, which I don't have the ability to explain, but basically as we are providing services to students, we get reimbursement for that. There's a small number of things that we can use that money to pay for. Historically, what we've done is we've paid for guidance counselors at the local budgets. So we've basically just given them money and said, you can use this to offset your guidance counselors. It's not tied to a position or anything. What we are proposing doing is we're gonna hold that Medicaid money at the supervisory union rather than subgranting it to districts. And then we're gonna pull back those line items that you have in your local budgets to fund the after-school program. So we would take that on and we would take it on within the funding of that grant. What we do is we then push the true cost of the guidance counselors back out to each of the districts, which logically makes more sense, in terms of trying to explain what's in a local budget to folks. The other advantage to the after-school program, and it's not really relevant to the way we're doing it now, is unlike most of the money we have in education, that Medicaid money we're allowed to keep if we don't spend it at the end of the year. So as Heather's working on our programs and anticipating ESSER money going away and some of the 21C grants reducing, if she doesn't spend all that Medicaid money in year one, it's there for year two, and she can use that to kind of soften some of those blows.
Anybody else? Morgan, on option 3, what will that bring it down with your prediction of the dollar yield? How close would be to that dollar floor?
Give me a few moments, and I can open that for you. And I think you should talk amongst yourselves while I
But it's
hear.
not that quick. So I think that the yield is the piece that's so hard because you wanna cut a respectable amount so that the community members know that we're hearing them. But at the same time, we don't know what the yield is gonna do. So every time a system like ours, there are 30 systems having these conversations right now because there are 30 budgets that were defeated, and I think there's somewhere around, Morgan, is it 17 or 18 that haven't voted the first time yet? 20 something.
Yes, I think 8 delayed and 12 or so normally don't vote this early.
So we've got around 20 that haven't voted on their first budget, so we don't know where they're gonna land. And we've got 30 in the state who in theory are, most of them are likely reducing. So that yield's gonna keep going up for every reduction that's being made, including ours. And so we'll see pennies come off the tax rate as a result of that, but we won't know that until the end of legislative session. That's what makes this so hard, because you're predicting, like we already know because, Morgan is the president of Vermont School Business Officials, so he has access to information, in real time, and so he's getting that prediction that it's gonna go to 10,000, which I think we're expecting that could be a couple of pennies on our tax rate, with it growing to that level, or close to a couple of pennies.
So that 0.5 FTE in the cold hollow, that's taking a full-time position and cutting it in half, right?
Yes, it's an open position right now.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's
no-
not,
There's no people, like the only reductions in the people came at option one, and those, and Matt and Kelly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know the person that Kelly found is a retired lady, she's lovely and she wants to stay on and do it, but she only wants to work the 2 days.
right,
And for Matt's, is that right, Kelly?
Yes, that's accurate.
And for Matt's, I believe, that position, that reduction was something that was proposed by the teacher, is that correct, Matt?
That's right, she is currently third time and wanted to stay at that.
Okay. And then, the EES, as I said, that's someone retiring. It's just not filling. Same for RHS, it's an unfilled position, it was new to the budget.
So Courtney will have this up on the big screen in a moment. And what I am doing now is anticipating a dollar yield of 10,000, which is a bit of a guess still, but I think it's the most accurate guess that we have. That drops the pre-CLA rate to $1.05. So a 12-cent decrease over the prior year. Takes a little while for it to go from this computer to that computer for some reason.
You should just talk, or we're still waiting. Oh, I got my phone, hold on.
So again, at that rate, the yield moves another $500 and you're at or below a dollar. And we won't know for sure until May. We'll probably have a reasonably good indication by the end of next week where this ends up. And I think we said this in an earlier meeting, so Rachel and Josh, I don't think you were here, but we've been talking about an April 30th date for a revote. There's nothing really magical about that other than it's a Tuesday and it's after school break week. Because on this side, the article giving the board authority to borrow money failed, we have a longer lead time in terms of rewarding the budget, we're told. So we would have to meet April 30th, I think we would have to warn it by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. On the other side, that article passed, and so they only have to do the budget, and they have a shorter window for that. And there's no law that says that the two districts have to vote on the same day, but we think it would be a lot less confusing to voters if everyone was going on the same day. So if you look at this on the big screen, that is not the right one.
That's better.
That one. That's better. So the first column is your FY24 budget. Your second column is what you proposed to voters, and that was turned down on town meeting day. The third column is the budget that we're talking about right now, and this is with the cuts that you saw in option 3. So in terms of direct instruction, there's a cut of a little over $400,000. Part of that is the after-school program change that we talked about, as well as those positions that were mentioned. The third line, vocational instruction, you see that half-time work-based learning position cut there. Under the support services section, the increase of $199,000 is the cost of pushing those guidance counselors back into your budget. And then central services, about $250,000 down, is your share of the savings that the SU board just approved a few minutes ago. And so then if you scroll down to the bottom, in this blue section, you'll see the district-wide tax rate that we proposed on town meeting day was in that column to $1.1093. That was down about 7 cents from the $1.17.5, which is the tax rate for this year. This budget is bringing that down again another 5.5 cents to $1.05, or a 12-cent decrease from FY24. You can then see below that sort of the impact on the local tax rates. So the Enosburg tax rate would be up a penny after the CLA. Richford's still up 10 cents, and that's because of that big swing from the correction after the townwide assessment reappraisal. And I can quickly give you option 1 if you want, because that was what I guessed. I haven't done anything for option 2 yet.
Okay. Before you do that, just if there are people watching that haven't seen slides 14 and 15 yet, I think it's important for you to just grab those two.
Okay.
And this is non-updated.
So, yes, that was 14. So this is the district-wide tax rate. Again, this is before the CLA is applied for Enosburg-Richford, starting in FY20, which is the first year that we were a unified system. So you'll see that for the first 2 years, the tax rate remained relatively flat, and then it started a pretty steady decline from FY22 through to FY25, the proposed budget. And this was the proposed budget as of about an hour ago, so it doesn't capture the most recent changes. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that we're overlaying the green bar, which is the local tax rate in Enosburg, so the tax rate after the CLA, and in red, the tax rate in Richford after the CLA. So you'll see for the first 2 years of our existence, the tax rates stayed pretty close to the district-wide rate. Property values were pretty steady for those first 2 years. You'll see from 22 to 23, then to 24 and 25, even though the district rate was dropping from 22 to 23, those local tax rates stayed relatively the same, increased a little bit because of that increasing real estate market. And then Enosburg on the green line, despite further decreases to the local tax rate, those post-CLA tax rates steadily increased each of those next 2 years. In Richford, it's a different story. From FY23 to 24, they had their townwide reappraisal, so that local district rate dropped pretty significantly. Individual tax bills did not, because folks saw a higher number on their local tax bills, that local grant list. And then that CLA increased pretty dramatically from 24 to 25. And so it is likely that you cannot cut this budget enough to get that to be a flat increase because of that screaming CLA and because you are so close to cutting to that dollar tax rate where you can't cut any further.
So I think it's important for people to just understand that part, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what factors are actually contributing to those significant increases in what you see on your property tax bill. And I think Vermont's education funding system is, might be the most complicated in the country, but it certainly is challenging was talking with Mrs. Loisel between these meetings, just about like perceptions about CLA. People don't understand it, and the CLA is not something that we can impact with anything that we're doing in our budget. Only thing that we can impact is what's happening with that black line and what's happening with the red and green line in this example. That's a result of property values and what you're having to pay as a result of those big swings. So those are pieces, certainly if people have questions, they can feel free to reach out or, watch some of the information sessions that we have posted online. Hopefully that will help them to understand the pieces that we have control over. It's also confusing when we try to describe how, this is a unified district, but the two communities end up with a very different tax rate. And that has to do, again, with the complicating factor of the CLA being applied to the education formula, because those grand lists are at the town level, so you can have one district tax rate, but having those be applied to the local grand list around property values it's really complicated to understand.
To add to that, the black line is almost already at $1. That's what I want to show, and we're almost flatlined with both of the budgets right now. Once we hit that $1, that's it. We can't go no lower than that. So even if we were to knock another $500,000 off in the budget, it's not gonna matter. It's still gonna be,
Part of it would probably go back to the state.
yeah, it's still gonna be the same. It's gonna be the same dollar for the when you apply the CLA.
So you're in the place now where you probably should go back to slide 12
Yes.
for me.
And we're in option 1 compared to option 3. How much of a difference is that?
You get up, or if you wanna put that one on there. I'm just gonna,
This section's not good.
basically a penny difference.
Okay.
So this one would have you at $1.639, again, assuming a $10,000 yield, which is as good a bad guess as any right now. But yeah, those cuts for option 2 and option 3 basically buy you a penny.
So if you go back and you think about that slide that Morgan shared earlier about the cost of the penny for each of those communities. So if we were to reduce by another penny, that would save someone with a $100,000 home in Enosburg $13 more, and in Richford $9 more on their tax bill. That's for $100,000.
Any other discussion on that from board members?
Can you pull that slide up again just so everybody can see that? Show them the difference.
Yeah, I did 1 cent,
Yeah,
maybe
1
slide
cent
10.
back.
I'm having a hard time hearing. Can you restate that piece of about defense?
Just wanted to pull this slide back up so people could see the impact difference.
So, Aku, I think what we're showing is that between option 1 and option 3, if you cut at option 1, it's a certain level that we just talked about. If you jump to option 3, it would impact your tax rate by a penny. So for someone who owns a $100,000 home in Enosburg, that would save them $13 on their tax bill. For someone that owns a $100,000 home in Richford, that would save someone $9 on their tax bill.
So just to clarify, option 1 is a penny and option 2 is 1 additional penny, so we would give it 2 pennies. Am I understanding that correctly?
I can't really hear what you're saying.
I didn't get that, can you try that again or put it in the chat maybe? Your mic's cutting in and out.
I'll put it in the chat.
We also have some visitors tonight too. Is there any comments from the visitors? Anybody on Zoom?
I know one who's just listening for now. Okay, so Akua said option 1 equals -1 cent, and option 3 is -2 cents, question mark.
Is it
Option 3, option 1 and option 3 was -2. Option was -1, option 3 was -2.
Yeah, that's what she's asking.
That's your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me,
I think
I wanna
if
say yes.
a penny costs 168,000,
I think option 1 was about 2 cents. It's worth about 2 cents, and option 1, 2, and 3 together is worth 3 cents is the way to look at it.
Do you think it may be wise to start with something with the lowest option, given that we don't have the yield yet?
That is a good question.
Yeah,
I really feel like option 1 may be the best option at this point until we know more information.
so if you did option 2, Nate has just reminded me offline that there's some salary assistance for that co-op position, so we would not reap the true benefit of half that cost in option 3. But you should check my math. But if we did option 2, I'm pretty sure it's 2.8 cents. Around 2.8.
Yeah, there's not a big gain from 2 to 3. We're only cutting about 35,000 out of that.
Okay.
You said that was getting funded out with that position.
He gets some assistance through
It's through the state, there's a salary assistance grant, and so the next year you would get some money back from that salary. Or you wouldn't get money back from that salary if you cut.
Rachel, any thoughts?
Not really.
Josh?
So the -13 and 27, is that off of the difference from the original budget?
Yes.
Do you have the general increase from, say, last year's budget to this year? How much, like, if in this diagram, they're going off 100, 200, and 300,000, do you have a diagram showing the general increase from last year to this year?
I don't, but I can probably come up with it.
Just so people can see it in writing kind of thing?
So I will check my math, but I believe that in Enosburg, that the education tax was right at $1,400 for a $100,000 home. And in Richford, it was $869. So we proposed an $85 increase, let's say, in that town meeting day budget for Enosburg. And then in Richford, it would have been about 160.
Was that for the reappraisal?
That's,
After.
that is after the reappraisal. Yep.
Devin or Cooley, you have anything? I'm I'm leaning towards option 2. I don't know anybody else.
I'm leaning towards option 1.
Can we go back to that screen, that has 3, please? Oh.
Rachel, any thoughts?
I mean, I would really like option 1, but I know, I feel like it needs to be option number 2.
Josh?
I agree, I think you gotta just show.
Yeah.
You know, be willing to show more than just, you know, the lowest amount kind of thing. I think we'll get, you know, more people to agree to it.
Cool.
Want to read her comment?
Yep.
Right.
I'm using the chat, but
I got it, I'll read it for you, Akua. She said, first off, acknowledging the grueling and time-consuming nature of this process for administrators at the SU and SD levels, I appreciate all the emphasis on what I believe we, the board, and the admin staff value in terms of avoiding forced reductions or eliminations of positions while ensuring that the communities feel heard by the taking of aggressive action. That said, I am leaning towards option 3.
So you
So 1, 2, 2, and 3.
1, 3.
I haven't really said that. So I was looking at 3 as well, but when we mentioned that the funding was gonna come a little differently with that, that puts a little bit of a spin on it for me, so I think I'm leaning towards 2 as well. What's that?
It's the only difference, right? Is that one?
That one,
position?
yeah.
Is that one position?
That's it.
I will just add that we tried to do the option 3, so there was something on the table from each of the schools there. I will say the work-based learning piece is really important for our kids who are, accessing Coal Hollow. And if that is a full-time position, there's some benefit that both Enosburg and Richford High School get for non-CTE students in their schools as well. So given where we're going in terms of what we're preparing our students for and the types of skills they need for the workforce, that it's gonna be a harder position to fill at halftime than at full-time. So if you are wavering at all there, that might be a place, because there is some embedded benefit to both high schools by keeping that full-time.
And those are positions that are within the community, correct? Like when these kids are going out and working, like it's within,
Mostly, there are some that go outside of the community, depending on what they're trying to commit to.
So option 2 would give you a tax rate of $1.566, and option 3 is $1.546. So it's 0.2 of a penny.
Yeah. I'm good with 2. Everybody else good with 2? Josh good with 2?
Yep.
Rachel good with 2? Deborah, you good with option 2? Or are you supposed to go option 1?
I still strongly prefer option 1, but I think option 2 would be a decent compromise. I would be voting against option 3, honestly.
Okay. Akua?
She's put in the chat.
She's putting it in there.
Yeah, she said option 2.
Option 2,
She's
okay.
voted.
Alright, do you need a vote on that?
If you are ready to warn a budget, those are the motions that we're gonna need. Before we do that, we're gonna have to have a conversation around when we would want an informational meeting. I would recommend that you have one official one, which you're required to by law, but that you also plan on having at least one other in the other community. If not, plan on doing one in each school. But in terms of the warning, we just need to have one on there to make it official. And I'm assuming still that we're thinking an April 30th vote. Right.
So you would need to have it within a formal informational meeting within 10 days of that vote.
Okay.
In the week of the 22nd through the 26th, right before your vote, is vacation. So I'm gonna recommend that you consider,
The week before.
yeah, so you have an FNESU board meeting on the 17th. That's the only board meeting so far they have that week.
I am gone the 17th through the 29th.
How about 16?
I'm good to go.
Sarah, you
It's gotta be the week, it's gotta be later, it's gonna be after the 20th.
The 20th.
I got that.
10 days, within 10 days.
Oh, I went calendar. I went.
You went outside in 10 days.
I did, yeah.
You can certainly have other ones the week prior, and so you might want to consider having the official one on the 23rd, since it's your board meeting date. It's the day of the week you meet your board, and then doing another one the 16th. I don't think we need to set that one yet.
They don't meet on the
23rd?
No,
No, but it's the same day of the week.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, I'm gone. We're doing that Costa Rica trip for the kids.
I think that would, we would tag you into the other meeting potentially.
You do not need a quorum for the informational meeting. You
Oh, yeah.
should have as much participation as possible, but there's not a quorum.
23rd work for you?
23rd is a Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday.
April
23rd? Is that good for you?
Sure.
Okay, well, 23rd.
Where would you like it?
We had last time, I did.
We had
Informational was-
both Richford High School and Enosburg High School extension.
So can I just say,
Yeah.
like, I'm coming back from an appointment in Burlington that I've already rescheduled once this year, and it takes 6 months to get it. So I would prefer, if you're gonna do it, that we don't start before 6 or 6:30, and then it's in Enosburg, so I can get there on time.
Okay. So-
Not rescheduling that very again.
And these meetings are at the schools, the information
Yes.
meetings.
About the 23rd at 7 o'clock. Over.
I think I could do 6 if you
You
did.
can do 6? Okay.
Yeah.
6 would be better. 6.
6 p.m.
Enosburg.
At high school.
Enosburg High School.
Okay. And as long as people have calendars out, you could look at the week before and when we could do one in Richford, and whether you want to schedule more than that. And what I'm going to do is print out copies of this and let you guys review them.
So just avoid the 17th because of the SU meeting.
Yeah.
So 16th or 18th?
You can do 18.
You 16th?
Yeah, you do 16.
So we'll say April 16th. Has 6 still work?
Richford,
Richford High School.
Richford High School. Okay.
Get those coordinated.
Thank you.
And they'll magically show up in your
time
calendar.
6, is
Like magic.
You just said, how did that happen?
Oh, magic.
I remember vaguely seeing something like, you guys first started sending me stuff, and they came back up today, I was like, what the heck?
You'll get a lot of those from me.
Yes.
It's appreciated.
You're gonna need a motion, right, Morgan?
Yeah, but I don't want them to look over the
Thank you, guys.
warning
Thank
first.
you for coming.
Can you grab one and just put it on?
While he's working on that, one of the things I think is gonna be important to communicate with both of your communities about is about that other warning on there. So for some reason, they voted down the authority to borrow, and I think people don't understand what that is. So if there's a delay in the state sending us the money from the ed fund, we need to be able to make payroll for the principals who are on here online and all of your other year-round ways on the ER side. So you have the ability, if you need to borrow to make sure that you can make payroll, because your money doesn't actually, if you have excess revenue or excess money from this year, you don't get to keep it to like do payroll that goes back and you get to touch that for another year. So I think we've got to work on, as you're talking to people, talk to them about how important it is just functionally to approve.
Could you incorporate that when we do the informational meetings?
Yeah, we'll do that.
And when we have these informational meetings, are like, when we see all of this, like where the cuts are, we're gonna go into more detail, because again, I'm really thinking like that, when I see that leaps and reading what people's feedback are, just being prepared to answer those questions.
And I'll communicate
Okay.
sooner than that with families about like, it probably won't be until
Okay.
the end of the week or the weekend, to be honest with you, but I wanna get through what NFB cuts are, and then I'll follow up with these are the final decisions.
And board members and principals in Zoom land, I just sent a copy of the warning for you to proofread.
I have to proofread that too, then.
You ready for motions?
Does that look all right, everyone? So the first motion would be to warn a revised FY25 budget in the amount of $24,067,773.
All right, Rachel made a motion. Devin?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
I'm aye.
And then the second motion would be to approve the budget vote warning and authorize the chair to sign it away from the table.
I have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Sarah made a motion. Roll. Devin?
Aye.
Akua?
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Okay.
The last thing is I just want you to give me the direction, be clear with me about your intention around reducing existing staff.
I make a motion not to be reducing any staff at either school.
Okay. Do you need a motion on that?
I don't think we need a motion, I just think you need to give me that direction to not do it. And I just wanna say, I appreciate you hearing that and you supporting that, because I think it's pretty important that we take care of our teachers. And I know this has been, it's added a layer of stress to my work, but it has added a layer of stress to theirs as well, because of the uncertainty. It has people really worried, and you know, we want to keep we love our staff and we want to keep them here and have any issues. So I want to be able to communicate about that as soon as I can.
Anybody else anything on that?
Thank you, teachers.
Anything else?
Anything else?
I'm good.
Oh, communication.
Communication.
So back to one of the things that we just started to unpack again, this data was coming live, slide 13. This data was coming live today, and we were trying to unpack it. So things that we wanted to talk about are, our intention is to have those meetings in both communities, which we've just now finalized. We're likely to offer, an opportunity. We have community members that come to these meetings. I always appreciate it, because I think people come in with a certain understanding, and then when they hear what we're actually contending with and what our actual reality is, I think sometimes they leave with a different perspective. So we'll offer up a couple of opportunities to be in communities. And the other piece that we'll do internally is we're gonna get out to our schools and talk to our staff members, and encourage people to ask all the questions they have, and then also to make sure they exercise their right to vote. And I think it's important for us to support you as board members. So will be some of these visuals that you were talking about, Rachel, like you have the benefit of being able to learn at these meetings about like true implications around all of our decisions and around how our decisions are impacting our decisions in other parts of the state as well. So we'll give you a packet of information with talking points and visuals that you can use as you talk to friends and neighbors. And we thought it would be helpful to give the Richford board members and the Enosburg board members a little bit of time to look at the voter checklist and maybe make a list for yourself of some of the people that you know that you might be able to say, hey, do you have any questions about the budget? I know there was a question last time around like, how do we get the voter checklist? And I just wanted, it's public information. We've asked for it just to be able to identify, you know, people that may or may not have voted, and making sure that we're doing our part to encourage all the people that we know to show up and get their questions answered at these informational meetings, but show up and vote when it comes to voting on the budget. So if we could end with that, maybe more, maybe give 10 minutes or so for each of you to look at it. So this is the Richford one. Your principals have already had this opportunity. Oops, yeah, I did that right. And that's the Enosburg one. Your principals have already had the opportunity, and I know some of them are already working hard to engage people that they know in the communities with those conversations. So
When you guys opened this building relatively new, did you guys do an open, I can't remember, like, did you do an open house? I thought so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, now, just so, you don't own the building because you can't.
we can't, right?
So everything that's in here, all the building part, that was SU funded, right?
Like the build out?
Yeah, the building
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah,
But, cause I know there's been questions about that.
yeah,
Okay.
We paid a small portion of it.
yeah.
Oh,
We didn't pay for the whole thing.
the people that own it. Okay,
Franklin County Industrial Development Center.
so, okay. And then you rent it from them. Correct. Okay.
I think the other piece, I know that there's some contention around us moving out of Richford. And I think it's important to remember that we did not have a handicapped accessible space in our
It's really
previous
difficult.
office.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, the thing was, you're in a difficult spot, and there was a lot of options in Richford, really. I mean, I didn't like to see it go either,
yeah,
but you didn't really have a whole lot of options otherwise, right? So,
Right.
kind of-
but we didn't have any other handicapped accessible options, and we have staff who, when we were in Richford, when we had to go to Sheldon or to Bakersfield, it was a 30 or 35-minute commitment just to drive there. So what we've seen in terms of a shift here is there are people that ask for our space, that work in school groups from all over the SU, or we pull people here and no one has to drive more than 15 minutes from being in the
So
middle.
it's more
I'd
central.
say this is more
It's
central
right
for a lot of
smack in the
your
middle.
schools. Yeah.
So I think that that's one of the things the business office has pointed to, is that it's more vibrant, or more people coming in and having small like committee meetings and coming in to work with us on things from being in the middle. So there's nothing behind that other than we need a handicapped accessible space, we need a more usable space. We wanted our team together in one office instead of in those two separate, and we wanted to be in the middle.
Right.
If you want shoulder to shoulder with that, and
I know there wasn't any issues and stuff.
And then Coy and Devin, we can try to figure out how to get you a list too. Courtney, maybe you could, we scan those to each of them?
They came to be scams,
Okay.
so you want them to get one or just some
Just
downstairs?
check
There's the days. Can you just give the Enosburg board members the Enosburg checklist and the Richford board members the Richford checklist? And that way, if he does it that way, you can look at it in your own time too, just make a list. But if you could, you know, maybe communicate with each other, like if you both know, you both might know some of the same people.
I already know there wasn't a lot of ages checked off, right?
Okay.
Like, look. So that will help. See what I mean? What is that? because they're all registered to vote in the town.
And it's what ballot
Can
they
we
took for
revote
the
like that, can they do
presidential.
absentee?
Anybody could take whatever.
For
And
what's
it
the
makes
strategy
sense.
that way, I
And you
feel
can
like
register to vote the day of, so.
Okay. Registered to vote, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised with how many people I know.
Yes. Trend even for presidential stuff, though, just a lot of people don't care anymore.
I try, I think my age group is
And
absolutely.
don't even have to get a switch to it, that's awful. Just so,
At the very end, there's a section in each of those checklists that are kind of questionable, like people, they're not certain whether or not they still live in your community. So I think you'll note that when you get pretty far into the back of that. But I just want to confirm both for the principals who are listening and for all of you as board members, the intention of sharing this is not to shame anyone for not voting. Like people also get to choose that, whether they come out to vote or not, but just to encourage them to be informed and to think about voting this next time, rather than focusing on this last time.
and you said you were gonna get packets to us. and-
We'll post some packets together that'll help you to communicate with visuals. We'll make them pretty so we can help you understand. I feel like you've all probably heard it enough times where if you use these visuals, you'll be able to describe it, but if you get the visuals and you've got a question, reach out to Morgan or myself.
Yeah, I've had a lot of just hearing from people just nervous about like friends that work within the supervisory and just being fearful of like losing their jobs and,
Yeah,
you know.
I wanna get rid of that fear as soon as we can.
We can't go in that direction. We tried so hard to recruit teachers.
I know, right?
Time to find
Yeah.
teachers.
Well, and that's what, if we need to, I'd rather exercise transfer if we have to, rather than the reduction.
Can I ask a question about healthcare for the teachers? Do they only get benefits if they're full-time, no matter what? So
What's the
even
minimum number of hours?
I think it's
It's in law.
42 days a week, it's 4.4 FTEs, right, they can access
You
it.
get prorated, but then for support staff, it's like 17 or 18 hours, and they get the benefit option.
So like say these teachers that are refusing to work full-time, what do they have to do to still get the benefits?
They get prorated benefits. So they would need to pay more out of their pocket if they were taking the benefits. And that is another misconception, I think that was clear in this. People don't understand that we have a statewide health bargaining team, like we don't negotiate about healthcare at all.
Yeah.
That's determined at the state level, so there's not a factor that we could push on.
Yeah, no, I was just curious for like their side of things,
Yeah.
like for like what they're looking to gain out of being a teacher kind of thing.
The misconception of, you know, they don't work 17 weeks out of the year, understanding, you know,
Yeah.
that they do.
I would love for people to hang out here in
A
the summer.
planning piece that goes
Yeah.
behind it, you don't just, you know.
There's a lot of
lesson
teachers
plans
that
and-
are here,
Yeah.
we have like week-long
Yeah.
professional learnings, and I
Yeah.
think of one teacher, for example,
It's
last year
nice.
that did like 5 of those week-long professional learning opportunities last year.
Anything else? All right, if nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Rach made the motion. Devin,
Aye.
Kua,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Josh.
Aye.
I'm an aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, and